The grand chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with an unsettling energy. Massive crystal walls gleamed under the light of 12 artificial suns, their beams reflecting off the polished surfaces, casting a shimmering glow across the room. The atmosphere was thick with tension as representatives from hundreds of species nervously adjusted in their seats. Their forms were as varied as the stars themselves, some humanoid, some shifting in gaseous or crystalline forms, others with shapes beyond comprehension. Despite their differences, every being in the chamber shared one thing in common: unease. High Commander Raxo stood at the central podium, his crystalline exoskeleton sparkling under the harsh light. His massive frame seemed to absorb the energy around him, his every movement causing the light to reflect in dizzying patterns. 4 hands gripped the podium, the deep hum of his body vibrating through the air as if his very being was about to crack under the pressure. His eyes, dark and reflective like the void of space, scanned the room. Though his face was composed, a slight tremble in his posture betrayed the gravity of the moment. The chamber fell into silence. It wasn't the typical hush of order. This was something heavier, the kind of silence that signals something far more significant. The representatives leaned forward in their seats, waiting for the High Commander to speak. Raxo's voice cut through the stillness, deep and resonant, but with a rare tremor that rippled through his words. "What I am about to share," he began, his tone both commanding and strained, "will change everything we thought we knew about primitive species classification." The room, once buzzing with quiet conversations and movements, now sat frozen. Even the subtle whirring of machinery and the low hum of gravity generators seemed to still, as if the very walls of the chamber were listening. The High Commander paused, his 4 arms gripping the podium even tighter. The tension in the air was so thick that it seemed to press against the chests of the council members. Then, with a slight shudder that rippled through his exoskeleton, Raxo continued. 3 solar cycles ago, we discovered a Level 2 civilization in the backwater spiral arm of Galaxy Section 7249. These beings call themselves humans. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, the room was filled with the sound of dismissing clicks and low whistles. Level 2 civilizations were of little concern. They were species barely mastering space travel, confined to their own solar systems, and often seen as no more threatening than a young species still learning to walk. The thought of such a species challenging the powerful Galactic Council was almost laughable. But then, Raxo slammed both of his hands down onto the podium with a force that echoed through the chamber, shaking the air itself. The shockwave of the impact sent a ripple through the council, a sound like thunder that left the chamber still. The light above flickered, a brief moment of chaos that made the already nervous representatives flinch. "What makes these humans different?" Raxo said, his voice now lowered, filled with barely controlled urgency, "is not their technology. It is their creativity when it comes to dealing death." The chamber fell silent, the words sinking in. The representatives, who had moments before been dismissive, now sat rigid in their seats, their eyes glued to the High Commander. Even the methane breathers, who communicated in pheromones, released an anxious scent into the air. The air felt thick with anticipation. Raxo continued, his voice trembling slightly. "We followed standard protocols for studying pre-contact species. Our stealth observers, cloaked beyond their detection capabilities, began to disappear. No, they didn't just go dark. They vanished completely, disappeared. And it was the humans, these primitives with their basic technology, who somehow detected our ships." A wave of disbelief swept through the chamber. Many of the representatives clicked and hissed in confusion, while others leaned forward in their seats, ears and sensors trained on Raxo, waiting for the next revelation. The High Commander's hands now trembled as he activated a holographic display above the podium. "What's more," Raxo said, "these humans, with their primitive technology, adapted their tools in ways we never imagined possible. They turned their entire planet's entertainment broadcasting network into an early warning system. They weaponized their magnetic fields." His eyes darkened. "And that's just the beginning." The chamber was now filled with an air of growing alarm. Representatives shifted uneasily, their usual calm demeanor shattered by the sheer impossibility of what they were hearing. How could this species, this primitive, level 2 species, turn the most mundane aspects of their world into such devastating power? Raxo's voice dropped to almost a whisper, forcing every being in the room to lean in. "The most disturbing thing," he said, "is that they are enjoying this. Every time we think we've countered their latest innovation, they laugh. They make jokes. They turn their victories into something they call memes and spread them across their primitive digital networks. They're not just surviving, they're having fun." The council members, some of the oldest and wisest species in the galaxy, now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Their eyes flickered with unsettled concern. The idea that a species could find joy in warfare, that they could celebrate it with humor and games, was completely alien to them. High Commander Raxo's eyes glowed faintly, his voice heavy with disturbing realization. "I've studied countless species, but never one like this. They don't just survive combat, they thrive in it. And worse still, they seem to be enjoying it every step of the way." The room remained still, as though time itself had stopped. Every representative, from the methane-breathing species to the towering crystal beings, felt the weight of the words settle over them like a dark cloud. Raxo took a long, shaky breath. "This humanity, they're not just a threat. They are something we've never encountered before." And with those words, the galaxy's perception of humanity was forever changed. High Commander Raxo stood firm at the podium, his crystalline exoskeleton shimmering in the harsh light of the artificial suns that hung overhead. His massive form seemed to absorb the energy around him, casting waves of shifting light as his every movement reflected the weight of what he was about to reveal. He took a deep breath, attempting to regain his composure, knowing full well that what he was about to say would change everything the galaxy knew about humanity. 3 solar cycles ago, when our expedition first began, we thought they were just another level 2 civilization, primitive, undeveloped, and not a threat to us. They seemed like nothing more than another species barely able to escape their atmosphere. But then, everything began to change. At first, the data we collected was simple. We, the observation fleet, had surveyed Earth, and all initial readings seemed mundane. Humans were using primitive technology. Nothing extraordinary, just barely beginning to develop rocket technology, nuclear weapons, and crude electronics. From what we observed, they were like any other level 2 species. Just another planet, struggling to survive within its own limited atmosphere, seemingly unable to reach beyond their solar system. We thought it would take them millennia to even begin interacting with other species, let alone challenge us. But then we discovered something that shook the very core of our assumptions. At first it was small, strange anomalies in the data, signals that didn't match the expected pattern, subtle disturbances in the energy readings. We didn't pay much attention to it, dismissing it as interference, until Nikar, our xenoanthropologist, started analyzing the data more closely. "This is odd," Nikar said while reviewing the signals. "These humans seem to be developing a kind of technology that we haven't anticipated. They're advancing much faster than we thought. And then one day, the silent observer, still cloaked in stealth mode, suddenly detected a disturbance. At first, we thought it was nothing, just a minor fluctuation in the data. But then it came again, stronger this time, and then it happened. The humans had found us. We hadn't expected it. Their primitive technology, things like radio waves, barely advanced telescopes, shouldn't have been able to detect a ship as sophisticated as ours. But somehow, they had done it. They had pinpointed our position. A pulse, faint at first, but growing steadily, emerged from Earth's atmosphere. It wasn't a typical search pattern. It wasn't random. They were tracking us. How could they have done this? Nakar whispered as he reanalyzed the data. The pulse was coming from Earth's broadcasting systems, from their entertainment networks, something we hadn't considered as a potential threat. Humans had somehow weaponized their own communication system, turning it into an advanced detection network. The moment of realization hit us all like a shockwave. How had they known? How could a species with such primitive technology have not only detected us, but created a system capable of revealing our location? It was impossible. And then the attack came. It wasn't with advanced weapons, as we feared. They launched a missile, but not to destroy us. They didn't aim to obliterate us. They aimed to trap us. The missile emitted an electromagnetic pulse, disrupting our cloaking field just long enough to expose our location. We had underestimated them. Nakar couldn't fathom it. How could they know all this? He asked again. They didn't just detect us. They understood how to counter our most advanced technologies. It wasn't just a matter of survival anymore. The humans had been preparing for this moment for centuries. The data flashed across the screen. Human media, films, video games, and stories about alien encounters. It hit us like a blow to the chest. All of their fiction wasn't just for entertainment. It was training. Every movie, every game, every simulation they created. It had been a rehearsal for the real thing. Every alien invasion story, every possible conflict scenario was a step-by-step guide to survival. When the humans initiated their counterattack, it wasn't with advanced weaponry, but with creativity. They had taken the very tools we thought were their weaknesses and turned them into deadly weapons. What we had thought were primitive systems were now tools for their defense and offense. And then it became clear. The humans had been preparing for this. They had spent centuries perfecting these strategies, not just in battle, but through fictional scenarios. Their very entertainment was their way of preparing for survival. Every conflict, every alien encounter was just another test run for the real thing. When we realized this, when we saw the full scope of their preparation, their creative thinking, we knew we had been completely wrong about them. These were not a species barely capable of surviving. They were a species that had transformed their entire cultural output into a series of preemptive survival tactics. They didn't just survive in a hostile universe. They thrived. And they did so with a speed and imagination that left us terrified. What was even more horrifying was their joy in it. They weren't just surviving. They were enjoying it. Every victory, every tactic, every new development became part of their growing legend. It wasn't a tragedy to them. It was a game. And they were winning. That was the moment when everything changed. We didn't just realize they could be a threat. We realized that they already knew how to defeat us. They were ready for everything, and they had been preparing for generations. The crew aboard the Silent Observer, cloaked in the deepest quantum camouflage, watched Earth below. From their hidden vantage point, they had been observing the blue planet for several cycles now, and everything appeared as expected. The humans, just as they had been classified, were a Level 2 civilization, primitive and barely scraping the surface of space exploration. The ship's cloaking system, designed to hide even the most advanced technologies from the most perceptive eyes, rendered them undetectable. They were safe, their presence unknown to the planet below. At least, that's what they thought. Nikar, the xenoanthropologist leading the research mission, stood at the central console, his eyes flicking over the streams of data that filled the room. His many limbs moved with practiced precision as he monitored the humans below. Their technology was still crude, nothing impressive. Primitive rockets, rudimentary computers, and electromagnetic signals that barely reached beyond their atmosphere. The humans were predictable. They were no threat. But then something strange began to happen. At first it was so subtle, so small, that Nikar dismissed it. A slight flicker in the readings, a pulse of energy that seemed out of place, but not enough to warrant alarm. His data kept coming in, seemingly normal, until it didn't. The pulse grew stronger with each passing cycle. It wasn't random interference anymore. It was intentional. The humans had somehow detected them. "How is this possible?" Nikar muttered, his voice tense as his mandibles clicked in confusion. The ship's cloaking technology was flawless, undetectable by even the most advanced species. But somehow, the humans, these primitive beings, were starting to find them. The ship's instruments flared as the pulse intensified. It was coming from Earth, originating from their communication networks. Their entertainment broadcasts, to be precise. They were using their television networks, their video games, their movies as detection systems. Nikar's breath caught in his throat as he analyzed the data again. The humans weren't just watching the stars. They were using their primitive broadcasting systems to scan the sky, to find anomalies, to track signals. It was an idea no one had ever considered. They had weaponized their entertainment, turning something as simple as a television signal into a tool for interception and detection. The implications of this realization hit Nikar like a shockwave. Before he could process the full scope of what was happening, a new alert flashed on the screen. Missile launch detected. Nikar's heart skipped a beat. Missiles? The humans? They were still years away from having the technology to track and target ships like the Silent Observer. How could they be launching missiles? The data came in fast and clear. The humans had launched a missile at their hidden location. A primitive missile, yes. But it wasn't intended to destroy them. It wasn't even aimed at the ship's hull. It was a signal disruptor. The missile was designed to release an electromagnetic pulse, one that would disrupt the cloaking technology and expose the observer to detection. "Impossible," Nikar whispered, his mind racing. "They've adapted faster than we anticipated. How could they—" Before he could finish, the cloaking system of the Silent Observer began to flicker. For a moment, the ship's shimmering exterior faltered, and the unmistakable outline of the ship appeared briefly in the open. The pulse from the missile had struck their cloaking system, enough to momentarily breach its effectiveness. They were exposed. The ship immediately went into emergency evasive mode, attempting to restore the cloaking field. The missile itself hadn't destroyed them, but the EMP had triggered a chain reaction in their own systems, forcing them to reveal their position, if only for a moment. But it was too late. The humans had already anticipated their next move. Nikar's thoughts spun wildly. He had underestimated them. The humans, with their simple technologies, had somehow adapted, weaponized their entertainment network and turned it against them. They had turned their vulnerability into strength, and now the Silent Observer was exposed. "We need to get out of here," Nikar ordered, his voice firm, despite the chaos swirling in his mind. "Prepare to retreat. This mission is compromised." But even as the crew activated the retreat protocols, it became clear that escaping wasn't going to be as easy as it seemed. The humans, now fully aware of their presence, had begun to adapt again. Human ships, built with primitive rocket technology, now began to move toward them, maneuvering with eerily precise coordination. They weren't just shooting in the dark. They were predicting their every move. The humans were thinking like hunters, like predators. "They've learned," Nakar murmured, his voice heavy with realization. "They're not just reacting anymore. They've turned their entire strategy into something unpredictable. We thought we were the predators, but we are the prey." The humans, using their limited resources, began to use the natural features of space, the gravitational fields of asteroids, the voids between planets, to hide their ships. They didn't need the advanced stealth technology of the observer. They used natural phenomena to mask their presence. They were fighting in ways that no one had ever predicted, using strategies that were as unconventional as they were effective. "They're mimicking submarine tactics," Nakar realized aloud. "They've taken their experience from the oceans and applied it to space. They're hunting us." The human fleet began to close in, and Nakar could feel the panic rising in his chest. He watched as their ships, simple but effective, maneuvered with a deadly grace. The humans weren't just fighting to survive. They were enjoying the challenge, the thrill of the hunt. They were having fun. With every moment, the human ships adapted, learning faster than any of them could react. They weren't just surviving. They were thriving. The humans had turned their primitive technology into a force so powerful, so dangerous, that no one could have prepared for it. And now, it was clear. The silent observer, and everything it represented, was no longer safe. "We have underestimated them," Nakar whispered, as the crew scrambled to restore the ship's cloaking technology. "We thought they were a level 2 species, but they've turned their weakness into our greatest threat." And as the human ships continued to close in, Nakar understood the full scope of the human ingenuity he had just witnessed. They had turned their entertainment systems, their entire culture, into a weapon. And now, they were using that weapon against them. What was meant to be a game was now the deadliest thing they had ever encountered. The crew of the Silent Observer drifted silently in the depths of space, cloaked under a quantum shield, invisible to the primitive human eyes below. For cycles, they had observed Earth from afar, studying the strange blue planet and its inhabitants with a mix of curiosity and disdain. Humanity, they had concluded, was still a level 2 civilization, barely scraping the surface of space travel. The humans had developed primitive rockets and rudimentary technologies. To the crew, they seemed insignificant, an infant species that would take centuries to rise to any level of galactic importance. The Silent Observer was designed to remain undetected, its cloaking field absolute, its presence hidden in the vast emptiness of space. The aliens watched from the shadows, believing themselves safe, thinking that humanity would never even notice their presence. But as they continued to observe, something strange began to happen. The humans, with all their primitiveness, started to adapt at an unpredictable speed. It was subtle at first. A flicker in the data. A signal here, a fluctuation there, but nothing that seemed urgent. The ship's systems hummed quietly as Nakar, the lead xenoanthropologist, studied the humans below. His antennae twitched with irritation as he analyzed their patterns. Their communications were primitive, nothing that could pose a threat to a civilization so advanced as theirs. Or so he thought. Then came the first strange signal. It wasn't large or threatening, but it was directed at them. The pulse came from Earth's communication systems, their entertainment network to be specific. At first, Nakar dismissed it, thinking it a glitch, but the signal repeated itself. And this time, it was stronger. They were attempting to reach out. They were detecting them. For a moment, Nakar's mind raced. Humans detecting their presence was impossible. Their technology was too primitive, Yet the signal kept growing stronger. They had created a detection network using the most basic systems: their television broadcasts, their radio waves, their movies. They had weaponized entertainment, using it to scan the stars, to find anything that didn't belong. The idea was inconceivable. How could they have done this? And then, to everyone's shock, a missile was launched from Earth. A missile not to destroy, but to trap. It was an EMP, a device designed not to obliterate, but to disrupt. The missile emitted a pulse of electromagnetic energy that interfered with the ship's cloaking technology, briefly revealing the silent observer's position. In that split second, the aliens had been exposed. Nakar's eyes widened with disbelief. The humans weren't just detecting them, they were actively targeting them, using primitive weapons to disrupt their advanced technology. The silent observer immediately engaged emergency protocols, but it was already too late. The humans had anticipated their every move. The transmission that followed came as a complete shock. Through the static of space, a human voice, calm and clear, echoed across the void. The image that appeared was of a human, Madison Chen, standing with a serene smile, as though this was nothing more than a casual conversation. "To the occupants of the vessel hiding in our sky," she said, her voice unshaken by the situation. "We know you're there. We know you've been watching us. It's time we talk." For a moment, the silent observer's crew was paralyzed, their disbelief thick in the air. How had the humans even found them? How had they made first contact so quickly, so unexpectedly? There was no fear in her voice, no panic in her eyes, just the steady, unflinching certainty that they were in control. Madison's voice cut through the silence. "You've been studying us for cycles now, but you've misunderstood something fundamental. You think we're just a primitive species, but you made a mistake. You didn't realize that everything we've ever done, everything we've created, it wasn't just for entertainment. It was preparation. Preparation for this exact moment." The crew stared in stunned silence. They thought they had understood humanity, seen them as nothing more than a young species, still struggling to reach the stars. But now, hearing these words, they began to understand. Madison wasn't just speaking as a representative of humanity. She was speaking as if humanity had known this moment would come, and had been preparing for it deliberately for centuries. "We didn't just create movies, books, and video games for fun," she continued. "We created them as training. Every alien invasion story, every battle, every worst-case scenario we've imagined wasn't just fiction. It was practice. And now here we are, and we're ready for you. Ready to turn every single scenario we've ever imagined into a reality." A cold shiver ran down Nakar's spine. The humans had been preparing all this time, not just for survival, but for war. They had taken their fiction and used it to craft defensive strategies. They had woven the art of combat into the fabric of their very culture. Madison's voice grew firmer, her eyes locking onto the camera. "You've underestimated us. You thought we were weak. But now you'll see just how wrong you were. We've been preparing for you." The transmission continued, but the message was clear. Humanity was no longer the fragile species the galaxy had assumed. They weren't merely surviving. They were thriving in the art of war. They had used their creativity, their ingenuity, and their fictional scenarios to prepare for this very moment. They had weaponized their imagination. As the transmission ended, the silent observer's crew stood in stunned silence. They had entered this mission thinking that humanity would be an easy subject to study, an insignificant species to observe from the shadows. But now, they realized that the humans had turned their fiction into reality, and they were ready for whatever came next. They weren't just survivors. They enjoyed the fight. They thrived in it. They were not a species to be feared for their technological might. They were a species to be feared for their creativity and their ability to adapt. And now, they were fully prepared for first contact, but not as victims, as victors. The humans, it turned out, were not the weak, primitive species that the Silent Observer's crew had once believed. They were using unconventional methods, taking the most basic tools and transforming them into deadly weapons. They had taken cleaning supplies, of all things, simple household items like bleach and cleaning detergents, and used them to craft improvised explosives. What the alien species had assumed was nothing more than a weakness. The humans had turned into a strength. They were able to create deadly devices from materials that would have been dismissed as harmless by anyone else. A bottle of cleaning solution could be transformed into an explosive device with the right combination of chemicals, and the humans had learned how to do this with frightening precision. Every object, every material, no matter how seemingly insignificant, was a potential tool for war. The Silent Observer's crew watched in disbelief as these same humans began to adapt tactics that had once been reserved for the depths of the ocean. Using what could only be described as submarine warfare tactics, humanity took their ancient methods of ocean combat and applied them to space. Ships that had once been limited to floating on water were now hiding among asteroid fields, using the gravitational pull of massive rocks to hide their movements. The humans had learned from their past, from their oceans, and they used that knowledge to their advantage, moving through space as though they were invisible beneath the surface of a dark sea. The human ships were like submarines, silent, swift, and always just out of reach. The Silent Observer's crew tried to track them, but the humans had already anticipated every move. They knew how to use their surroundings, how to use gravity to disguise their position. And then, the humans did something even more unexpected. They began using pattern recognition to outmaneuver the alien ships. Humans, who had once been dismissed as little more than simple creatures, were now showing an incredible ability to learn and adapt on the fly. They had spent centuries perfecting their ability to predict outcomes, to read patterns in everything from their video games to their simulations, and they brought this skill to the battlefield. As the humans faced off against the alien ships, they quickly began to understand the patterns of their enemies' movements. Every turn, every strategic shift by the aliens was anticipated by the humans, who used that knowledge to outsmart them at every step. Lieutenant Blake Torres, who commanded one of the human fleets, was a prime example of this. His background, though not in space combat originally, had been in submarine warfare. He had trained in the deep oceans, where precision and silence were everything. And now he applied those same principles to space. His fleet moved through the vastness of space as if it were the ocean floor, silent, unseen, and always a step ahead. Every time the alien fleet thought they had the humans cornered, Torres's fleet would disappear into the next asteroid field or behind the gravitational pull of a distant planet. The humans, despite their limited technology, had turned the battlefield into a playground of deception, using their knowledge of patterns to stay ahead of their more advanced enemies. Torres had honed his instincts through years of video games and combat simulations, and now those lessons proved to be invaluable. Every movement was calculated, every maneuver was planned, and his fleet moved with submarine-like efficiency, making them nearly impossible to track or predict. The Silent Observer's crew, once confident in their superiority, now found themselves helpless against an enemy who was not only adapting, but thriving. The humans were using tactics that the alien fleet had never considered, much less practiced. With each passing moment, it became clearer that the humans had turned their seemingly primitive technology into a massive advantage. They had learned from their mistakes, from their games, from their history, and they were using all of it to overcome an enemy that was far superior in terms of raw power and technology. They weren't just surviving the battle, they were enjoying it. Every new encounter was an opportunity for them to learn more, to perfect their techniques, and to exploit the weaknesses of their enemies. The humans thrived in combat because they had spent their entire lives preparing for it, not through advanced weaponry, but through creativity, adaptation, and the ability to turn every challenge into an opportunity. Nikar watched as the humans continued to outmaneuver their enemies, using submarine tactics, improvised weapons, and pattern recognition to stay one step ahead. The aliens, with all their technology and firepower, were no match for a species that had learned to think outside the box and use every bit of knowledge at their disposal. The humans had shown that they didn't just rely on strength, they relied on smart thinking. Every battle, every simulation, every video game they had ever played had prepared them for this moment. They were now using those experiences to rewrite the rules of war. And as the battle raged on, it became clear. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They were changing the way wars would be fought in the galaxy. They had taken the most basic tools, the simplest of strategies, and turned them into something far more powerful than anyone could have ever predicted. They weren't just using advanced technology to win, they were using creativity, cunning, and adaptability to defeat the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The battle near Jupiter had escalated beyond what anyone could have anticipated. The Galactic fleet, with its massive warships and advanced technologies, had expected an easy victory over humanity. The humans, with their crude hybrid ships, their modified technology, and their unconventional tactics, had turned the tide of battle in a way that no one could have predicted. Humanity's hybrid ships, a strange combination of human-made technology and stolen alien tech, moved through the chaos of the battle like ghosts, undetectable and unpredictable. They were a hodgepodge of what the humans had managed to salvage and modify, but somehow they were proving to be more effective than the most advanced warships in the galaxy. They weren't just using the technology they had, they were transforming it. The humans had learned to hack, modify, and bend the laws of physics with their primitive systems, turning their ships into moving weapons that were as deadly as they were unpredictable. The first shock came when the human fleets began using their improvised technology, simple tools that had been transformed into deadly devices. What the Galactic fleet had considered useless, tools that were meant for cleaning, for building, were now turned into weapons of war. Humans had taken their household chemicals, their aerosol cans, their detergents, and turned them into explosive devices that left alien ships reeling. They used their limited resources in ways that the Galactic fleet had never considered, turning everyday items into powerful bombs and explosives. These simple yet effective weapons caused more damage than anyone could have expected, creating a cascade of destruction among the alien ranks. But it wasn't just their weapons that caught the alien fleet off guard. The humans had also begun using submarine warfare tactics, old methods developed on Earth's oceans, revised and adapted for space combat. They treated the vastness of space like an ocean, using the gravity fields of nearby moons and asteroid belts to hide their movements. Like underwater predators, their ships would dive into the shadows of asteroids, hiding in the gravitational well of Jupiter itself. The Galactic fleet, with all its advanced sensors and detection technology, struggled to track the human ships as they disappeared into the field of debris. The humans were silent, almost invisible, moving with precision and evading every attempt to catch them. The battle was no longer a straightforward confrontation. It had turned into a deadly game of cat and mouse, with the humans always staying one step ahead. Lieutenant Blake Torres, leading the human fleet, was a master of this new form of combat. His background in submarine tactics had given him the edge in space. With every move, he seemed to anticipate the enemy's next strike. The humans had spent centuries preparing for the inevitable. And now, every piece of knowledge, every simulation, every video game they had ever played was paying off. Torres had trained in pattern recognition, the ability to read and predict an enemy's next move based on subtle clues. He could see the battlefield like a chessboard, and with every engagement, his fleet would adapt and adjust, using the environment to their advantage. The Galactic Fleet's predictable strategies began to fail miserably against the humans' unconventional tactics. As the battle raged on, the humans deployed their most devastating weapon yet: quantum cascade bombs. These bombs weren't like any conventional weapon the Galactic Fleet had encountered. The humans had taken their modified quantum drives, stolen from alien ships, and reconfigured them into unstable yet incredibly powerful bombs. When detonated, these bombs didn't just destroy their targets, they erased them. Not in the traditional sense of destruction, but in a far more terrifying way. The quantum cascade erased the entire quantum state of the target. An entire ship, along with everything associated with it, would cease to exist. No explosions, no debris, just nothing. The ship was wiped out from reality itself. Entire fleets of galactic ships disappeared into nothingness, victims of a weapon they didn't understand. The Galactic Fleet commanders watched in horror as their most powerful ships were torn apart by these modified human devices. They had expected the humans to fall quickly, to be easily overpowered by the superior weaponry of the Galactic Fleet. But instead, the humans had taken the technology of the enemy, adapted it, reprogrammed it, and turned it into something even more dangerous. What was supposed to be a quick, decisive battle had now become a war of wits, with the humans turning the laws of physics itself into a weapon. In the chaos, the alien fleet found themselves on the defensive, struggling to cope with an enemy who didn't fight by the same rules. The humans weren't just fighting to survive, they were thriving, using their creativity and resourcefulness to stay ahead. Every time the Galactic Fleet tried to regroup, the humans were already there, anticipating their moves, attacking from unexpected angles, and bending the laws of space and time to their will. The Galactic Fleet's superior technology, despite all its might, was useless against a species that had learned to exploit its weaknesses with an unrelenting drive to adapt. As the battle neared its climax, it was clear the humans had turned the tide. The Jovian system, once a perfect battleground for the Galactic Fleet, was now under human control. Their hybrid ships, designed with rudimentary technology, had proven more than capable of defeating the most advanced fleets in the galaxy. The humans had shown that when it came to war, it wasn't always the most powerful weapons that won. It was the ability to adapt, to innovate, and to think beyond the ordinary. The Galactic Fleet, despite its technological superiority, had been outsmarted and outmaneuvered at every turn. The battle around Jupiter raged on, the vast planet casting its ominous shadow over the scene. The human fleets, despite being outnumbered and seemingly outclassed by the Galactic Fleet, had found a way to shift the momentum of the fight. Their ships, crude yet advanced in their own way, danced through the debris and gravity fields, using everything they had learned to manipulate the battlefield. The galactic forces, with all their technological superiority, found themselves being outmaneuvered at every turn. What the alien fleets didn't realize, until it was too late, was that humanity had mastered the art of psychological warfare. While the Galactic Fleet relied on sensors, patterns, and raw firepower, the humans had learned to exploit their enemies' mindsets and systems. With every encounter, They twisted the data, manipulated the sensors, and created false readings that sent the alien ships chasing shadows. The humans, using their hybrid ships, crafted from a mixture of stolen alien tech and their own innovations, could hack into the alien fleet's systems, flooding their screens with misleading information. The Galactic commanders, unable to trust their own systems, began doubting every move they made, and in that doubt, the humans found their opening. With each battle, the humans played the aliens like a game of psychological chess, forcing them into traps, misleading them with false leads, and setting them up for ambushes. The human ships seemed to be everywhere at once and nowhere at all, slipping in and out of sensor range, exploiting every crack in the Galactic fleet's systems. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about manipulating the enemy's mind, making them second-guess everything they knew, and leaving them vulnerable when they were most uncertain. In the midst of this chaos, Madison Chen, a key strategist in humanity's defense, broadcasted a message to the entire galaxy. Her voice cut through the static of battle, calm and clear, carrying the weight of a plan decades in the making. "You think you understand us," she said, her voice strong with confidence. "You think this is a battle of technology, of weapons. But you've missed the point entirely. We've been preparing for this moment, not just in the form of warfare, but through something you couldn't have predicted. Entertainment. Every movie, every game, every fictional scenario we've created, it was all training. Training for the ultimate conflict." The transmission sent ripples through the alien fleets. The Galactic commanders, who had seen themselves as the superior force in the universe, now began to realize the true extent of humanity's preparation. Madison's words revealed a truth that shattered their assumptions. Humanity had not just survived the many threats to their world. They had prepared for an alien invasion for centuries. But not through conventional training or technology, through fiction. Every alien invasion story, every battle, every space opera was a way for humanity to hone their strategies, to train their minds to think about every possible scenario. The humans had used their entertainment, their movies and games, to prepare for this very moment. Madison's voice continued, steady and unwavering. "We didn't just survive because we had weapons or technology. We survived because we prepared. Every war game, every battle scenario, every story we've told was a training ground. We didn't just fight fictional enemies. We trained for the real thing. And now we're not just surviving, we're winning. This is the moment we've prepared for." The message echoed through the galaxies, forcing the alien fleets to reconsider everything they thought they knew about humanity. The humans weren't just fighting to survive. They were thriving in war, using their mastery of psychological warfare to control the very battlefield. They had turned the very idea of entertainment into a weapon, shaping their society's ability to think strategically, to predict outcomes, and to manipulate the very minds of their enemies. The humans had spent centuries honing this skill, and now they were unleashing it on a scale the galaxy had never seen. As the battle continued, the humans showed that their true power wasn't just in their hybrid technology or improvised weapons. It wasn't their ships or their firepower. It was their ability to think ahead, to adapt to any situation, and to turn their fictional scenarios into real strategies. The Galactic fleet, once thought to be invincible, now found itself trapped in a web of its own making. The humans had played their cards, manipulated the data, and controlled the narrative. The battle was no longer just about technology. It was about who could outsmart the other. And at this moment, humanity had proven that their psychological mastery was just as deadly as any weapon. The Galactic fleet was in full retreat. They had underestimated humanity's mental agility, their ability to manipulate information, and their relentless creativity. The humans were not just fighting, they were redefining warfare. With every battle, every new strategy, they had shown that they were more than capable of winning this war. Not just through brute force, but through the strength of their minds, their preparation, and their creativity. Nakar stood before the Galactic Council, the weight of his words pressing heavily upon him. The once mighty and proud council, filled with representatives from the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, now appeared humbled. What they had assumed would be a quick victory had turned into an overwhelming defeat at the hands of a species they had once considered primitive: humans. Nakar's voice echoed through the chamber, steady but carrying the gravity of his realization. "Counselors," Nakar began, his 4 hands clenched around the podium, his body braced with the burden of the truth he had to reveal. "We have failed. The humans, the species we thought was no threat, have shattered every expectation. They are not just adaptable, they are transformative. They don't just learn from their surroundings and experiences, they reinvent everything they touch. What we believed to be impossible, they have made real. They have rewritten the rules of war and technology, using what we considered their weakness as their greatest strength." As he spoke, Nakar reflected on the battles they had fought, the way humanity had turned their hybrid ships, crafted from alien technology and their own crude engineering, into instruments of destruction. What the Galactic Fleet had dismissed as inferior technology had become humanity's greatest asset. The hybrid ships weren't just advanced, they were unpredictable. Unlike anything the alien fleets had encountered, humanity had taken their own flawed technology and turned it into something dangerous, bending the very laws of physics to their will. "They didn't just adapt to our technology," Nakar continued, his voice rising with the weight of the realization. "They hacked it, they modified it, and in doing so, they transformed it. They have mastered the unpredictable, the impossible. We believed their lack of advanced weaponry would be their downfall, but instead, it was the source of their power. They have shown us that nothing is beyond their reach. They have reinvented our weapons, reprogrammed our ships, and turned our own technology against us." Nakar paused, his mind drifting back to the battles near Jupiter, the battles where human ingenuity had turned the tide. The quantum cascade bombs, weapons so destructive they erased targets from every quantum possibility, were just the beginning. The humans had created these weapons from technology that should have been far beyond their understanding. And yet, they had done it. They had changed the fabric of space itself, using our own knowledge of the quantum realm to obliterate entire fleets without a trace. The humans had taken everything they learned and used it differently, in ways that no one had imagined. "Humanity has done more than just survive this war," Nakar said, his voice now heavy with both awe and fear. "They have thrived. They've taken their so-called primitive technology and transformed it into unbeatable power. What we once thought of as mere games and fiction, their stories, their simulations, their movies, have been their training grounds. Every scenario, every battle in their entertainment was preparation for this moment. And now, we see that they are not just a species in their infancy, they are beyond us." He could see the stunned reactions of the council members, their faces pale with the realization. Humanity had not just been preparing in the traditional sense. They had been training for this moment for centuries, but not just through battle and war. It had been embedded in their very culture. The movies they made, the games they played, the stories they told, all of it had been preparation for the very conflict that was unfolding before the council now. "They don't just fight with weapons," Nakar said, the truth sinking in. "They fight with ideas. Every single battle, Every fictional scenario they've imagined has been a training exercise. They have taken every piece of entertainment, every game, every movie, and turned it into real, living strategy. They've spent centuries learning how to anticipate every outcome, every enemy move, every potential conflict. And now, when the time came, they were ready. Nakar took a deep breath, looking at the council members who had once believed their civilizations were the pinnacle of evolution. But there is something more terrifying than just their current mastery. Humanity is still growing. They are still evolving. And their potential is limitless. The technology we saw them develop, it's only the beginning. Their creativity, their adaptability, it is still expanding. They will continue to learn, continue to invent, continue to reinvent everything they touch. He let the silence linger, his words hanging heavily in the air. The humans are not just surviving, they are transforming the galaxy. They have no limitations. They are not bound by the rules that we have lived by for millennia. They will change the very nature of war, of technology, of everything we know. Nakar's eyes met those of the council members, his voice dropping to a near whisper. And that is the most terrifying part. Humanity is not done. They are still growing, still changing. If we do not change our view of them, if we do not understand them for what they truly are, we will find ourselves overrun by a species whose potential is still untapped. The future is theirs, and we are merely standing in their way. Nakar's final words echoed through the chamber, the weight of them settling over the council. The truth had been laid bare. Humanity, once underestimated, was on the verge of becoming something the galaxy had never seen. A species that would not just survive the future, but shape it. In the vast expanse of space, the final moments of the battle had passed, and humanity stood on the precipice of a new era. The Galactic Fleet, once believed to be the supreme force in the galaxy, had been utterly defeated, outwitted by a species they had once thought insignificant. Humanity, with all its flaws and imperfections, had proven itself to be a force, unlike any other. The once strong empires of the galaxy were now forced to face the truth. Humans were not to be underestimated. They were a species that had spent centuries preparing for this moment, not just through military might, but through their creativity, ingenuity, and imagination. In the wake of the battle, Nakar, the xenoanthropologist, stood before the Galactic Council, the weight of the reality now setting in. The humans had not only survived the war, they had thrived in it. What had once seemed impossible, turning fiction into reality, adapting technology, manipulating physics, had been accomplished by the human race. They had shown the galaxy that they were capable of transforming the very fabric of space and time, bending the laws of physics and engineering in ways that no one had thought possible. Now, in the quiet aftermath of the war, Nakar's voice rang through the chamber, heavy with the weight of the knowledge he had gained. "The humans are not just survivors," he said, his voice echoing in the silence. "They are transformers. They do not simply learn from their environment. They reinvent everything they touch. Their technology, their society, their very essence is built upon the idea that nothing is beyond their grasp. What we once thought impossible, they have made real. They have proven that they are capable of achieving what no species has ever done before." As he spoke, the galactic representatives listened in stunned silence. The once proud leaders of the galaxy could no longer deny what had become apparent. Humanity's potential was limitless. They had turned the tide of war, not just with their weapons and strategies, but with their creativity, their ability to adapt, and their relentless pursuit of innovation. Nikar's eyes flicked over the assembled leaders, and his voice lowered, carrying a final, urgent warning. We must acknowledge that humanity is still growing. They are still evolving. The technology they use to defeat us, to outsmart us, to turn the laws of the galaxy against us. This is only the beginning. Their potential, their ability to reinvent reality itself, has no limits. If we do not change our perception of them, if we do not respect them for what they truly are, we will find ourselves facing a species whose strength is still untapped. The humans will not just be a force in the galaxy, they will shape the future itself. The Galactic Council had no choice but to accept Nikar's words. The humans had shown the galaxy that they were no longer to be viewed as a primitive species. They were in control of their own future, and the universe would have to adapt to their terms. The age of underestimating humanity was over. As the chamber remained silent, Nikar made a final proposal. A new law must be passed to restrict access to Earth. Humanity's home planet must be protected. No one should be allowed to approach Earth without the proper respect, for humanity has shown that their creativity and their ability to defend themselves are unparalleled. They are no longer a species that can be manipulated or controlled. They will choose their allies, and they will defend their own, with a strength that no one in the galaxy can match. The words hung in the air, and the galaxy, once certain of its own superiority, now found itself humbled by a species that had transformed the rules of war. Earth, once thought insignificant, was now the center of a new galactic order. The future was no longer a matter of dominance. It was about understanding and respecting the infinite potential of humanity. In the final moments of the council session, a transmission was sent out, carrying the voice of Lieutenant Blake Torres, one of the humans who had led their forces to victory. His voice, steady and unyielding, echoed across the galaxy, a final message to all who might hear it. We're just getting started, and when we're ready, we'll be the best allies you've ever had, or the most dangerous enemies. With those words, the galaxy understood. Humanity had arrived, and they were not just fighting for survival. They were creating the future. A future in which they would stand at the forefront, shaping the stars to their will. The war was over, but the real battle had only just begun.